President Trump says the war will be over quickly. Iran says they'll get back to us. Who has the upper hand? An apparent suicide note from Jeffrey Epstein is made public. What it tells us. And 13-minute security gap. A CBS News investigation finds a lapse in surveillance video in the key moments leading up to the shooting. Hello, I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in for Major Garrett tonight. Welcome to the Takeout and thank you for joining us. The war with Iran has become a waiting game. Iran says it's reviewing the most recent U.S. proposal. The White House has continued the ceasefire and paused Project Freedom, tamping down aggression in an effort to reach a deal. This as Iran attempts to formalize its control of the Strait of Hormuz, which would mean a significant advance in power from before the war. President Trump says the war will be over quickly. His optimistic outlook in recent days have calmed the markets, which is something he has been focused on.
We just hit a new high in the stock market. The stock market's the highest it's ever been. And I expected that the market would be down 20-25%. I was willing to do that to get rid of a crazy country. Crazy. The people, look, you talk about regime change. Their first level leaders are dead. Their second level leaders are dead. Some of their third level leaders are dead. I call that regime change. But I thought we'd be down maybe 20%, and we're up.
Now the Dow is back near 50,000, close to its all-time high. Brent crude oil is just over $100, down from its high of $126, but still well above its pre-war levels of around $70 a barrel. And gas prices continue to rise, now at $4.55 per gallon, up from roughly 50% since the start of the war. Now, President Trump is no doubt feeling the pressure to get all of these numbers moving in the right direction and ending a war that polling tells us most Americans don't support would be really the only way to do that. So for the latest on where these negotiations stand, Chief White House Correspondent Nancy Cordes joins us now for more. Nancy, great to see you. I feel like we start every episode of the Takeout this week asking what the White House's position is on the state of the war at this point. So I'm going to ask again, what can you tell us here?
They are in a waiting game, Caitlin. They have sent a proposal over to the Iranians, a one-page proposal, basically an outline for the future of talks, just enough to kind of button up this war, try to get the strait reopened, and move forward with talks because, as you point out, the pressure is really building when it comes to gas prices, fertilizer prices, jet fuel prices, and all the rest. So we're waiting for an Iranian response. The Iranians say they're looking over it, that they will let the Pakistanis, who have been mediating these talks, know when they've got something to say. But clearly, the Iranians and the U.S. are still quite far apart when it comes to what President Trump says is most important to him, which is the future of Iran's nuclear program.
And Nancy, speaking of the Iranian side, Iranian state media is trying to take credit as the sole controller of the Strait of Hormuz. I'm wondering how the White House is responding to that.
Well, the White House has been insisting for weeks that the U.S. is actually in control of the strait, despite the fact that, I think it's indisputable that that Iran has a stranglehold on oil traffic right now, all traffic going in and out of the strait. There are some 1,600 container ships, other vessels that have been stuck in the Persian Gulf for 68 or so days now. They can't get out. Other ships can't get in because of the threat that Iran will fire upon those vessels. And we've seen the Iranians make good on that threat. The U.S. tried to launch Project Freedom earlier in the week to create a bubble of safety around these ships so they could get out of the Gulf. That project was halted after just 2 U.S. flagged ships made it out. The president said he was doing that because he wanted to create space for these negotiations to play out with the Iranians. But there is also reporting that other nations in the region weren't happy with Project Freedom because they basically weren't informed ahead of time. So hard to make the case that the U.S. controls the strait, but that is the case that the White House and the Pentagon have been making.
All right, we will stay tuned. Thank you very much, Nancy, for your reporting. We appreciate it. And CBS News national security contributor Sam Vinograd joins me now. She's also a former assistant secretary for counterterrorism at the Department of Homeland Security. Sam, great to see you. Thanks for being here. I'm curious, we've heard lots of mixed messages coming from the White House, from administration officials, from the president over the last 24 hours. But I wanted to talk about the president's claim that Iran apparently, in his telling, has agreed not to have nuclear weapons. What should we make of that?
Well, we certainly want to curtail Iran's ability to ever have a nuclear weapon. But in my experience, the devil's in the details on this. When we talk about Iran agreeing not to have a nuclear weapon, we have to think about the different components of that. Certainly, Iran has a stockpile of what we call highly enriched uranium, material that could be used to create a nuclear weapon. At the same time, Iran also has a whole nuclear complex. They have devices known as centrifuges that are used to actually create that highly enriched uranium. They have nuclear facilities, some of which may be undeclared to international inspectors. And they have a whole research and development program. So if Iran really does agree to, quote unquote, give up its nuclear program, all components of the nuclear program not just have to be dismantled, but there has to be a really serious inspection regime in place, not dissimilar to what was in place after the first Iran deal was signed, which President Trump withdrew from.
And I do want to ask a little bit about that, because I think, that was my first question, was how does this, and again, we don't know exactly the details of what this deal is or would be or what it will end up like, but how is this, at least from what we know so far, different from the nuclear agreement that the U.S. pulled out of?
We really just don't know yet. What we know about the first nuclear agreement was that it put limitations on the level at which the regime could enrich uranium. It put levels on the stockpile of that uranium that Iran could have. It put restrictions on the amount of centrifuges Iran could have. It transferred certain facilities away from nuclear research and development. And it had a very significant inspections regime. We just don't have details on this proposal that's on the table. Best case scenario, there's some sort of armistice that's agreed to and some sort of agreement to negotiate on those technical details, because, Caitlin, they take time. The first Iran nuclear deal took 18 months to negotiate. And so this may take longer than 30 days or 3 to 4 months. But as we look at rising commodities prices, not to mention the huge price tag associated with the U.S. deployment in the Middle East and Europe to support Epic Fury and potentially Project Freedom if it restarts, time's not on our side in a lot of respects.
And as we're talking about these negotiations, what do we know about the state of Iranian leadership right now? I mean, who are they dealing with here?
What we know just from past history, Caitlin, is that the Iranian regime is not monolithic. During the first Iran nuclear deal, it took 18 months to negotiate the technical details, but at the same time, the negotiators also had to sell this internally. They had to get the supreme leader on board, and they had to sell this within factions within the regime. What we now know is certainly we have a new supreme leader, and the negotiators are going to have to convince the supreme leader, as well as other parts of the regime, that this deal is in the best interest of the regime, and importantly, that this deal is not just a wink and a nod and the Trump administration is going to come back 6 months later and just restart military operations. So the regime is certainly different than it was under the first Khamenei, but there's politics in Iran as well.
Still a long way to go is what we're taking away from this. And we'll have you back to discuss as we move forward. Sam Vinograd, thank you so much for your time. And now to the latest developments on Jeffrey Epstein. A federal judge has made public an apparent suicide note written by the convicted sex offender. The note was allegedly found by Epstein's cellmate, who says it was from his unsuccessful suicide attempt weeks before his death. And the note says, in part, quote, "They investigated me for a month, found nothing." Now, CBS News has not independently verified the note. Our Anna Schechter has been following all of these latest developments and joins me now. Anna, thank you for being here. Can you just walk us through what's in this note? And the question I had, and I think a lot of people have, is why is it coming out now?
It's a great question. So what is in the note? I think the most notable line here, and I have it right here, is he writes, It is a treat to be able to choose one's time to say goodbye. And this is what Nicholas Tartaglione, his former cellmate, homed in on. In fact, he spoke about this note in a podcast last year. So he's the one who referred to this as a suicide note. But, you know, it's interesting, Caitlin. I don't think we can definitively call it anything, except the handwriting does appear to resemble other notes found in Epstein's cell. So that, I think, is interesting. But Epstein was writing a lot of things a lot of the time. There you see no fun in caps. So to me, this lends credence to Epstein likely having written this down himself, because you see that similarity in the handwriting, similar phrasing. Initially, we weren't sure when we first heard about this note if his former cellmate made it up. Now, why now? His former cellmate says that he passed this note to his lawyer to defend himself against an accusation that Epstein made after his first suicide attempt, that his cellmate had tried to kill him. And Tartaglione denied this and said, look, this note could help me with this. And so that lawyer presented this note to a judge. The judge put it under lock and seal for years, and nobody has seen it since, until the New York Times petitioned to have it put out to the public. And so we just got it last night.
And that goes to my next question, Anna, and I know you've done so much reporting on this. And the Justice Department told CBS News that they've never seen this note before. How is that possible?
Well, that is possibly the biggest question, and we got an answer from them today. This afternoon, the Department of Justice spokesperson wrote to us and said the note has not yet been authenticated, and this is the first time the DOJ is seeing it. This purported note was submitted by Tartaglione to the court ex parte as part of sealed proceedings in which DOJ was not involved. So that's what the Department of Justice is saying. However, they probably could have gone and gotten this judge to release it earlier.
All right, a lot of questions out there. Anna Schechter, you're doing an amazing job trying to get answers for us. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. And now we turn to the nationwide redistricting fight. Tennessee's General Assembly today approved a new congressional map that carves up a majority black district in Memphis. Here's what some of the protests that broke out of the state capitol looks like. Louisiana and Alabama are also working to redraw their maps after the Supreme Court ruling that weakened the Voting Rights Act. Our Ed O'Keefe has made his way to Montgomery, Alabama. Ed, great to see you. I want to talk about Alabama in a second. That's where you are. But can you walk us through quickly what we saw in Tennessee today?
Yeah, Democrats in the state legislature, all they could essentially do today, Caitlin, was protest, and protest they did. Noisemakers standing on desks, marching out of the chambers, some of them getting arrested by state police for their actions, and ultimately Republicans in the House and the state Senate approved a new map that, as you said, draws Memphis out of a Democratic majority black district into 3 new Republican districts that stretch over there to the western corner of the state. Tennessee moving just days after the Supreme Court ruled that the Voting Rights Act can be interpreted in different ways now and account less for race. And so now all eyes turn down here to Louisiana and here in Alabama, where last night legislators, in essence, started the process of redrawing their map. The issue here is they have to wait for explicit permission from the Supreme Court because of a separate case that established the state's current congressional map that has 2 Democratic seats that encompass mostly black areas of this state. And we spoke with the state attorney general, Steve Marshall, Republican, who is also running for the U.S. Senate, about his attempts to convince federal courts to let Alabama redraw. Here's part of our conversation. Did the White House put you up to this?
We've not talked to the White House.
So you've not gotten any call from the president?
I've not talked to the president, nor have I talked to anybody from the White House.
What is the biggest misperception of all of this, in your view, either here in the state or from the outside looking in?
That somehow or another Alabama should be treated differently. And again, if you look at our numbers and you see the progress that's been made in our state, we are viewed from a lens of black and white, as opposed to most states being viewed from a red or a blue.
We ask about whether he sought a White House permission because, remember, the 7 other states that started this last year, Texas, California, Missouri, Virginia, Utah, North Carolina, all in essence did it for partisan reasons, sparked by the president's calls to have Texas redraw their map and come up with 5 more Republican seats. Now, the one guy here in Alabama who would probably get drawn off the congressional map should Alabama Republicans get their way is Congressman Shamari Figures, who represents this city, Montgomery, the birthplace of the modern civil rights movement, in a district that stretches all the way to the southwest down towards Mobile. We talked to him about what this would mean for him and his district.
To put us in a place where they want to go back to the maps that they drew back in 2021, I think is them attempting to rewrite history. And it's an attempt to act like they weren't caught with their hand in the old cookie jar of how Alabama was, in terms of the actions that it would take to suppress the black vote, to suppress voter turnout, voter registration efforts. And that does not sit well here. People are not excited about it. People are not happy with the idea of this state legislature trying to take us back to a place where we've been before.
I mean, the irony isn't lost on us that this is the place where people marched, fought, many gave their lives, or certainly shed blood for more representation. And here, decades later, having gotten a second district in this state, more representation for that community, it may not get taken back. I mean, that has to sit really badly with a lot of people around here.
Yeah, no, look, people are not excited about it. Right? Not excited about that possibility. But I do want to be clear. Look, we're very confident in Alabama's congressional maps and that they will turn out the exact way they are now.
Again, the congressman says he's confident the Supreme Court won't explicitly allow Alabama to do what Louisiana and these other southern states are doing. We wait and see. Decisions could come today, could come tomorrow, may not come for a few more days after that. Louisiana will act in the coming days. Mississippi and South Carolina are also making plans to eventually redraw their maps, if not in time for this year, Caitlin, then for the 2028 elections.
Yeah, Ed, I was just going to say, I mean, the ripple effect across the country is stunning, but also the midterms are just months away and all of this coming to a head. Speaking of the midterms, I know you're in Alabama now, but our viewers should know earlier in the week you were out in Iowa doing some reporting on one of those big matchups up there. What did you find? What did you hear?
Well, we were there because the vice president was there, in essence, kicking off his midterm campaigning for fellow Republicans. And this is a state that in the past has been controlled by Democrats. Right now, for the last decade, by Republicans. There are open governor's races, Senate races, and at least 3 of the 4 House races are expected to be competitive. So there will be a lot of attention on the Hawkeye State. One of the Democrats running for U.S. Senate is Josh Turek. He's a state representative from the conservative, western, mostly Republican part of the state, but he's a Democrat. He's a paraplegic who was in the Paralympics 4 times on the men's basketball team. So we played some hoops and asked him some questions. Here's part of the conversation. You're running in a state that Democrats would like to win back, but you're not North Carolina, you're not Maine, you're not Ohio, you're not Alaska. Right now, you'd be considered a reach state for your party. You're going to need a lot of money, though, to make this happen, right?
Yeah. You're not wrong on these. However, I'll disagree on the reach. I think Iowa's absolutely in play. I think the polling indicates that as well. Rob Sandlin.
Why is it taking everyone so long to realize that, then?
Iowa flies under the radar. You look at a state that Republicans have won for the last decade. Last time we were able to have somebody in the Senate was my hero, Senator Tom Harkin. And people look at us as a red state, but I say we're not a red state. We are a common sense state that has masqueraded more red than what we are. 30 years we elect Senator Harkin. We're a state that twice voted for Obama, 3 times for Trump, got more Obama-Trump counties than any other state in the union. And in Trump's last midterm, and to me, in my opinion, been traveling the state for the last 9 months, significantly more energy now than even then. We won 3 of the 4 congressional races. I think people forget that. And then even in 2022, which was a bad year to run as a Democrat here, we were only 1.5% away from having 3 of our 6 statewide officials being Dems.
I've heard you talk about being a prairie populist.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Oh, I thought they were both going to go in.
Yeah, well.
Prairie populism, to me, Senator Harkin, my hero, was also considered himself a prairie populist. It's somebody that is fighting for the middle class, fighting for the workers, fighting for small businesses, fighting for rural communities, for small family farms. We really do have a have and have not society right now. And we need more individuals that are going out there and fighting for the little guy, fighting for the middle class. That to me is what true populism is always your North Star being what is best for the middle class, for the workers. And so for me, I feel like I have, my North Star is always what is best for Iowa, what is best for Iowans, and what is best for the middle class.
So again, State Representative Josh Turek in a June 2nd primary with Iowa State Senator Zach Walz. Good example of what it means to be a Democrat in 2026, how to win a race. We'll be tracking this one, Caitlin. But as you know well, observers believe Iowa could very well become one of the more competitive Senate races and help determine the balance of power in the Senate after November.
All right, Ed O'Keefe, thank you for your reporting. It was notable you didn't have the camera right on your shot there. So had he not outed you for not making it, we would never have known. Good job, my friend.
A few were made. Not all of them.
Okay, I'll take your word for it, but we'll have to roll the tape on that one. All right, don't give up your day job. We'll see you soon. And still to come on the Takeout, the CBS News visual investigation of the White House Correspondents' dinner shooting. Our Homeland Security correspondent, Nicole Skanga, joins me next to share what she found. Also, reality TV star turned Los Angeles mayoral candidate Spencer Pratt is going viral for his AI campaign ads. His conversation with CBS News on the state of his campaign. Plus, why a progressive mega donor network believes funding directed towards new media and content creators will help usher in a blue wave this November. The organization's president joins me live. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. And welcome back to the Takeout. CBS News Homeland Security correspondent Nicole Skanga went back to the Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C. to try to get a better understanding of the security surrounding the White House Correspondents' dinner. And what she found was a 13-minute gap of security camera coverage in the moments leading up to the shooting. Here's more of her reporting.
This is the hallway that the gunman used to travel toward the security checkpoint on the night of the attack. For 13 minutes, his movements went undetected by cameras, apparently.
In fact, we found a significant portion of the terrace level had no CCTV camera coverage at all.
Would there have been Secret Service agents outside of the security perimeter around the Hilton, say in this hallway?
Potentially, but definitely there are Secret Service agents as well as law enforcement outside the perimeter, just doing that, looking and making sure and observing to see if anything suspicious does occur.
If there were, none of them apparently stopped him. Around 8:30 p.m., Secret Service agents are dismantling the security checkpoint equipment. Allen finally appears on camera, and he walks through a set of doors to a lobby area with a bank of elevators that leads to the event's red carpet and a hotel entrance. An officer, accompanied by his canine police dog, appears to follow him for a brief period. But just as his handler turns away, Allen bolts through the door, having stripped off his trench coat. Let's take a closer look at the officer and the dog's reaction again. Secret Service canines are trained to sniff for bombs, improvised explosives, not ammunition or suspicious people. If police dogs smell an explosive, they sit down to alert the handler. The officer who's handling the canine does appear to be looking at Allen. It's not clear why he doesn't spot him removing his trench coat. Now, a camera should have captured Allen removing the coat, but that night drapes were put up for the event, and they actually blocked that camera's view. A few seconds later, the agent turns around. Allen exits, then runs through a still-assembled magnetometer and appears to raise his shotgun. Authorities allege he fires in the direction of an officer who almost simultaneously fires back 5 times.
All right, and CBS News Homeland Security correspondent Nicole Skanga joins me now. Nicole, great work with that. It's just stunning to see it visually and you walking through that same hallway.
Well, and it's interesting, Caitlin, because in the lead up to the shooting, there were about 13 minutes where, as you can see, the gunman goes undetected. And yet this all plays out in the course of 7 seconds. And so overwhelmingly, what we have heard from former Secret Service agents and security professionals is that while the response was adequate, he should never have been that close to the security checkpoint in the first place. And so it'll be interesting to see. We were talking a little bit about what security might look like for the dinner moving forward. If there will be more coordination with the hotel, will Secret Service put up more cameras or perhaps allow some of the cameras that are up to be fully functional, not have that sort of aesthetic drapery there? There's also been discussion of moving the security perimeter wider, so decreasing that 50 feet that we saw from the magnetometer to where the entrance of the stairwell leading to the ballroom is. You do need more officers when you have more space, so we can expect to see more staff. And then the big question, will this become a national special security event, which is the sort of highest tier that the federal government can designate an event? The inauguration, the State of the Union is just like that. In a statement, Secret Service told us that the secure perimeter was established so that any movement from the public area to the protected site required screening at a designated checkpoint, and that they're constantly monitoring for security improvements.
And Nicole, it was just stunning to see you walk through where he had been, and amazing to see in that visualization how close he was able to make it. Thank you so much for all your reporting on this for the past couple of weeks. It's extraordinary, and we appreciate it. Thank you, Nicole. And Marco Rubio today tried to mend ties with the Vatican following President Trump's continued criticisms of Pope Leo. We'll discuss that and more with our panel next. You're watching The Takeout. And welcome back to The Takeout. Candidates for Los Angeles mayor had their first debate last night. Progressive City Council member Nithya Raman and Republican and former reality TV star Spencer Pratt are the two leading candidates looking to unseat incumbent Karen Bass. Some of the most contentious moments in the debate came over LA's approach to homelessness. Take a listen.
Homelessness was going up year after year, and under my watch, it is the first time we've had a decrease in street homelessness.
The way you address homelessness, the way you address people living on the street is by bringing them off the streets and indoors.
Councilwoman Robbins' plan for treatment first. I will go below the Harbor Freeway tomorrow with her, and we can find some of these people she's going to offer treatment for. She's going to get stabbed in the neck.
And CBS News correspondent Adam Yamaguchi joins us now. Adam, great to see you. So you spoke to Spencer Pratt, and I can tell you I'm dating myself, but I watched every episode of The Hills when I was in high school. I am just shocked to see this race developed into what it is. Tell me a little bit about your conversation. You talked about his experience or lack thereof running for office.
Yeah, that's right. Good to join you. Yeah, I think that, your experience watching him on The Hills is what a lot of people sort of associate with Spencer Pratt, and that is coming into this race. That not only makes him an unlikely candidate, but also even more unlikely as a person who could potentially, mount a serious bid in this race against the incumbent mayor. He knows that he is identified readily as little more than a reality star villain. But he's actually taking his lack of experience and he's making it an asset for himself. Take a listen to what he said.
I mean, look at Obama. He was a community organizer. I've won 2 community advocate awards for mine. Nobody thought, why can Obama become a senator? And then the president, he had no experience running the whole entire country, which is way bigger than LA. So when people have passion and they care and they have common sense and they have humility to know, I don't know everything, but what I do know is all these very smart, successful people in Los Angeles want to get around me, get behind me, and make sure LA is the #1 city in the world. So the team that I'll put around me, my job as mayor is actually just to fight for the constituents, to be in these communities, to be with the community leaders, to be fighting their city council members to get what they want done.
And I think a lot of LA voters are surprised to see that Pratt has made it to where he is. He's tapping into widespread angst over homelessness, the cost of living, crime, and drug use, and of course, that wildfire response. The June primary is coming up less than 3 weeks away. The top 2 vote getters, if no one hits the 51% mark, then goes on to the November election.
And Adam, it appears that you were talking to him in the trailer that he says he and his family are living in after their house burned down in the fires. Adam Yamaguchi, fascinating interview. We'll stay tuned for more. Thank you for being here. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio visited the Vatican today to meet with Pope Leo after President Trump's continued criticism of the head of the Catholic Church. U.S. officials say the two discussed the war in the Middle East and, quote, topics of mutual interest in the Western Hemisphere. So for more, let's bring in our reporter panel. White House reporter for Politico, Sophia Kai, is here, along with congressional reporter for Semaphore, Nicholas Wu. Guys, great to see you. Thanks so much for being here. I want to talk about Rubio this week. He is at the Vatican today, as we saw, but Sophia, earlier this week, he was at the White House, at the podium in the press briefing room. I know you were there. Tell us a little bit about what you made of that performance and what it might tell us.
That was kind of his moment, although he didn't ask for it. We know it was an impromptu thing. The White House sort of called him up and said, can you do this? And he showed up for about 50 minutes. He engaged with us on some important issues around the war, around China, around Venezuela and Cuba. But he also kept it light. He made several jokes with reporters, made some hip-hop references, and he was generally pretty well received. I should say that this was the moment that really made it more okay for people to start talking about him as a 2028 contender. Just last month, we had some reporting that some very senior White House officials started to see Rubio as a serious 2028 contender. And it's different than last year, where the MAGA base, didn't always take Rubio as seriously, saw him as the establishment. And the only serious presidential Trump successor would be J.D. Vance. I think now it's very different. Of course, it's up to Trump who he wants to endorse, if he endorses anyone. But Rubio has had quite a run this week.
Yeah, I mean, Trump is certainly the wild card here, but it was interesting to see Rubio put out clips of that performance and kind of, not monetize it, but get it out there in the public. I mean, Nicholas, we were talking also earlier this week about J.D. Vance, who is the current vice president. He's out in Iowa. I mean, nobody goes to Iowa by mistake. We all know that, campaigning for other candidates there. But what do you make of this kind of emergence that we're seeing of these two administration officials potentially vying to kind of take the Trump mantle?
We're seeing the very early stages of the shadow 2028 primary. Very, very subtle. J.D. Vance was in Iowa to campaign with a Purple District Congressman, Zach Nunn, who faces a very tight race, and to meet voters there. People who also conveniently could vote for him in a couple years. Now, at the same time, the struggle for people like Vance and Rubio is to try to make their own profile, while at the same time not overshadowing the president himself.
Yeah, that's always the biggest challenge here. Speaking of other people in the administration, Howard Lutnick was on the Hill this week to give a deposition to the House Oversight Committee. I know you've been covering this a lot. I mean, this was the highest profile member of the administration that we've seen come before the committee.
This apparently was the very first sitting cabinet secretary to go for a deposition or an interview with any congressional committee in U.S. history. And so, it's not clear exactly how far the ball was advanced. But this interview, Lutnick said that he's not been accused of doing anything wrong. He said that he didn't see anything untoward with Jeffrey Epstein, and he laid out a lot of the timeline. But Democrats hinted that if they take back the gavels next year, they will further investigate this.
Yeah, something we could see more of as this goes on. Sophia, I want to talk a little bit about some new reporting today that Kamala Harris, the former Democratic nominee, says that she wants the DNC to release their autopsy of her own loss. I mean, it's really stunning to me that they haven't done it. What's going on there? You see these calls among members of the base asking for this autopsy to come out. There's been a resistance to releasing it. What should we make of it?
I think people want closure. For months after the 2024 election, there was a sense of just being in a daze. And we kind of heard that from Democratic operatives across the country. Now, as the Democratic Party is trying to figure out what's next and what does the next 2 years, the next 6 years look like for them, there's this sense of let's figure out what went wrong. And for Republicans, there is a lot that has been learned from previous autopsies, right? This notion in the 2000s that the Republican Party needed to become more diverse, needed to have multicultural voters and to be a bigger tent umbrella. And there were serious improvements that came as a result of that. I think Kamala Harris obviously is considering another run. And I think she'll have to answer the questions of what went wrong if she's going to run for anything. And so that is why she is asking for that to come. And, we don't know what's in it. We don't know if it's been finished. We don't know very much about this alleged autopsy at all.
More questions about not releasing it than actually just moving ahead. Well, a lot of 2028 on the horizon. We got to get through the midterms first, but glad to have you both covering this for us. Sophia and Nicholas, thank you very much for your time. And still to come, Democratic donors are hoping influencers can help them win big in the midterms. I'll speak with the president of the Democracy Alliance about their shift in media strategy. You're watching The Takeout. And welcome back. The progressive donor network Democracy Alliance is planning to invest tens of millions of dollars into new media and content creators. It's a shift away from traditional mediums like broadcast television, and paid advertisements. Democracy Alliance President Pamela Schiffman joins me now. Pamela, great to see you. Thanks for being here. So I say this as someone coming from very traditional media. Tell me a little bit about this strategy of going right to content creators, right to this new media environment. What does that get you?
Thank you so much, Caitlin. It's so good to be with you. What I will say is that the media landscape has shifted dramatically. It has changed dramatically over time, and that's particularly true for young people. What we know is 3 out of 4 millennials or Gen Zers get their news from social media. That's where they're getting their news. So we need to meet people where they are and not where they used to be, right? That is really important, I think, for us, for us to have a healthy media landscape and to reach people.
I mean, it's interesting because this is not a new concept. In fact, Republicans did this very well in the last election. You know this. They were able to really tap into podcasts, new media, influencers. We saw that time and again. How did Democrats kind of fall behind there? What happened?
That's right. I think the right wing has spent decades investing in media, and we need to do the same. It's really important, and that has started. I think we're seeing it happening now. I think there's really incredible work out there in terms of increased local journalism, increased podcasts, really making sure that we're on all the time, not just some of the time, because it used to be you would get your news from 8 to 9 p.m. at night, and that's just not true anymore. So we're starting to see that happening, and we need it to happen more and more, because this is not just like this is not a this year endeavor. This is 2028 and 2032 and well beyond. It's really about a thriving democracy.
And how are you kind of finding these areas of investment? Are you looking at, particular content creators or influencers? And of course, I'm going to have to plug, you should still get your news from reputable sources. But how are you going about making these investments?
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you made that point about reputable sources, because I think really the thing that we're up against is that there's a lot of mis and disinformation out there. And that's what we need to combat, because that is what so many people are getting every day. And that cannot exist if we want to have a true democracy where we're getting the same information and the same facts. It's wildly, wildly important. So, I think for us at the Democracy Alliance, we know there's a very healthy ecosystem of organizations and networks who are really putting out pro-democracy, fact-based information, and we're, thrilled to, be able to support them. And many of the members of the Democracy Alliance independently are also supporting them.
And just quickly, because you've been talking to your members, I know you just had a retreat with them. What's the top issue that they are telling you they're concerned about heading into this midterm?
Winning. We're convinced we're going to win, but we need to win big, because the reality is also we are seeing signs that election security is going to be a real issue, right? This is not a normal election. We need to make sure that we are taking every steps to make sure that we have free and fair elections. Everyone gets to vote. We just saw a devastating Supreme Court decision, the Calais decision, which decimates voting rights in the South. And so it's really, really important that we are taking every step to both protect elections so that they're free and fair, and ensuring that we have wild turnout and that we win by huge proportions. And we think we will.
All right, we'll be covering all of this in the next several months. Pamela Schiffman, thank you very much for your time. And coming up, our CBS News radio flashback today brings us back to 1962 and the Cuban Missile Crisis. In the 13 days, the world stood on high alert, awaiting for another potential war. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout and to our latest tribute to CBS News Radio. For 13 days in October 1962, the world stood on the brink of nuclear war as the U.S. and the Soviet Union feuded over Soviet missiles stored in Cuba, just off the coast of Florida. CBS News radio program was interrupted with a special bulletin.
We interrupt this program. We have interrupted this program for a CBS Radio Net Alert Bulletin.
We take you now to the White House in Washington. George Herman reporting.
The White House has indicated that the Cuban missile sites under surveillance by the United States are continuing to grow in size and in strength. An official White House statement says this: the development of ballistic missile sites in Cuba continues at a rapid pace. Through the process of continued surveillance directed by the President, additional evidence has been acquired which clearly reflects that as of Thursday, October 25th, definite buildups in these offensive missile sites continued to be made. Activity at these sites apparently is directed at achieving a full operational capability as soon as possible. And the White House statement goes on.
The Soviet Union was looking to deter any other attempts from the U.S. to overthrow Cuba's communist leader, Fidel Castro. The U.S. argued it couldn't engage in talks under the Soviets' nuclear threat. Here's how the negotiations were described.
Several inconsistent and conflicting proposals have been made by the USSR within the last 24 hours, including the one just made public in Moscow. The proposal broadcast this morning involves the security of nations outside of the Western Hemisphere. But it is the Western Hemisphere countries, and they alone, that are subject to the threat that has been produced by the current crisis. The action of the Soviet government in secretly introducing offensive weapons into Cuba. Work on these offensive weapons is still proceeding at a rapid pace. The first imperative, says the White House statement, the first imperative must be to deal with this immediate threat under which no sensible negotiation can proceed. It is therefore the position of the United States that as an urgent preliminary to consideration of any proposals, work on the Cuban bases must stop. Offensive weapons must be rendered inoperable, and further shipment of offensive weapons to Cuba must cease, all under effective international verification.
And finally, the eventual deal between the U.S. and the Soviet Union saw the missiles removed from Cuba under United Nations supervision and a pledge from the U.S. not to attack Cuba. Here's CBS News correspondent Robert Pierpoint before the eventual treaty.
We take you now to the White House. CBS News correspondent Robert Pierpoint reporting.
The White House has just issued the text of a formal letter from President Kennedy to Chairman Khrushchev, in which the president repeats much of the same message that he issued in a statement earlier today, accepting the Soviet proposals for a relief of the Cuban crisis. He says, in part to Chairman Khrushchev, I think that you and I, with our heavy responsibilities for the maintenance of peace, were aware that developments were approaching a point where events could have become unmanageable. So I welcome this message and consider it an important contribution to peace. The message, of course, that the president is referring to is the one from Premier Khrushchev earlier today, in which Khrushchev offers to withdraw all Soviet missile bases from Cuba under UN sponsorship and verification.
And that does it for The Takeout today. For Major Garrett, I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns. The Daily Report is coming up next.